What's up, everybody? To prevent us from going actually crazy, it's time to go stir crazy. Episode 41, Stand Up, Fight Back, brought to you by the Real News Network. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Woo! It's been a rough couple of days out there for everybody, especially if you're black, especially if you're progressive, and especially if you are against police and racial profiling and state violence, gang. We have a lot to get into today, okay? On today's show, the shit went down last night in Minneapolis where protesters were tear gassed by police as they were protesting the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis cops, all caught on tape. The cops have since been fired. Not good enough. We need way more than that. Okay, we're going to get into that discussion in just a little bit, but also probably one of the most prolific instances of racial profiling that has gone viral in recent memory, the Central Park incident where the black bird watcher had the police called on him by a white woman after he told her to leash her dog. Well, shit went south for her in a big, big hurry. It was all good just a week ago for Amy Cooper. It is not all good today. We're going to get into that as well. And plus, folks, we are still dealing very much with a global pandemic, 100,000 Americans dead, nearly 40 million people unemployed, and the rent still remains due June the 1st. What can be done about that? How can you stand up and fight back against the rent being due, especially if you are being impacted economically by this pandemic? We have so much to get into. And of course, we missed y'all yesterday and missed you on Monday, Memorial Day. Hope everyone had a happy and safe weekend. Hope it wasn't y'all out at the Ocean City Boardwalk in Maryland. Hope it wasn't y'all out at the Lake of the Ozarks at that big dumb party in the pool where people were just spreading COVID-19 left and right. I hope everyone was safe and kept your hands clean and had your masks on, okay? Now listen, we want to hear from you in the comments and in the chat as usual. All of our regulars, we love to see your little faces in there, and we definitely want to hear what you have to say, so be sure to do that. But right now, it is time to introduce our panel for today on this Wednesday. Of course, we are joined by Stir Crazy regular fan favorite, Marcus Ferrell. He's a political consultant. New on our Stir Crazy panel, we're joined today with Holly Blue. She is the Outreach and Communications for Rent Strike 2020. Holly is going to give us the lowdown about everything that is happening with the rent strikes coast to coast. This is such an important movement, and I'm so glad that she's able to join us. And of course, our own senior correspondent for the Real News, Jaisal Noor. Jaisal has been covering protests and a lot of things related to the pandemic as it is impacting marginalized people in and around the state of Maryland. So, hey, gang, thank y'all so much for being here on this sort of a heavy Wednesday. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
All right, gang. Well, the first place we're going to start off is in Minneapolis, okay? The murder by police of 46-year-old George Floyd, father of two. The video is so horrific. I cannot and won't show the video here on this program. Floyd, that's what I said, right? I'm sorry, I said Floyd, George Floyd. My apologies to his family and for mispronouncing that. However, the murder is gone viral, gotten the attention of many across the world at this point. And I want us to take a quick look at some of the protests. Let's look first, Dwayne, at the daytime protests where people were out marching, and then we'll look at what happened last night with the tear gas. So let's take a quick look at that.
And the rest of them would be trying to play a cover-up. They almost tried to pull it this morning by saying once we put him in handcuffs, he started having medical issues. He didn't have no medical issue. Wasn't nothing wrong with the man when he came and walked into Cub Food. The only thing they was able to do is try to claim he got medical issues. If your knee in my neck for more than 10 minutes, I'm gonna have medical issues too, and I'm gonna die just like he did. That's a lie.
As you can see, there were hundreds of people out and about making their voices known and making their voices loudly known. But then things took a different turn last night as protesters continued to demonstrate in the streets, and they were met expectedly by a heavy handed law enforcement response. Let's take a look at that also.
No justice, no peace, no racist police. Shut it down. And we don't get it. Shut it down. And we don't get it. Shut it down.
How would you describe the atmosphere?
Toxic, ready to go. They're just waiting somebody to break the camel, and they're finna go down. This could have been my son.
Yeah.
It could have been my. It could have been me. It could have been my family. It could have been. It's unjust. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
Keep the peace. 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 Keep the peace.
Now, so this video, all courtesy of The Guardian. So that video, courtesy of The Guardian, the first video we saw was courtesy of Rupley. Now, panel, I want to turn it over to you. We're going to start with you, Marcus, because, you know, the 4 officers who were part of what happened to Mr. Floyd have been fired. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, said today that he wants charges filed. Let's get your take on what happened to George Floyd.
I mean, what happened is just another case of being black in America. Now, I want everyone to understand some of the basics of this. George Floyd was approached by officers for having $20 for $20 fraud, right? So you mean to tell me that $20 is worth your life? I want to point out a couple of things. In the same area, a few years ago, I believe last year, there was a black police officer that killed a white woman, and he was arrested, fired, and charged almost immediately, and there was no tape. If you cut to this year, you know, what you hear is the same thing over and over again in the very normalized fashion of, A, he was sick. B, let's look up his history to make him a criminal. C, he was resisting. Black people don't resist arrest like that. This ain't the damn movies. And it's just frustrating that these same narratives happen. Now, when it comes down to the protest, listen, I mean, we saw what happened in Michigan when white guys run up in state houses with AR-15s. And, you know, black folks and black and white folks can't protest peacefully without getting these tools that these police departments are just waiting to take these tools and all of these weapons that they buy from the army and government contracts just to test them out on the people. So you don't see them use this stuff against white protesters who are, you know, clamoring for freedom to get coronavirus. But you see it when you just have folks that want basic justice. But it's just us when it comes down to it.
Holly, I know you're joining us today from Seattle, and Seattle police also have a bad reputation for using heavy-handed tactics against either protest or marginalized communities, especially I'm thinking when they clear like homeless encampments. They are, you know, very harsh in clearing those areas. But, you know, the Minneapolis police in this instance really told some flat-out lies. They initially said, as Marcus pointed out, that Mr. Floyd was resisting, that he appeared to be under the influence of something. And if it wasn't for bystanders rolling video on this, we may not have known that A, he was clearly not resisting, and B, as Marcus said, I mean, the man was suspected of forgery, absolutely not anything violent, and yet at the same time, he lost his life. What's your take on this, Holly?
Well, I mean, what we see is something that we've seen time and time again with just cops defending cops. I saw somebody talking today about what's going on, and they basically said, like, look, they're using tear gas, they're trying to throw it back. It's basically the cops against the people, which I feel like is emblematic of the relationship that we have with cops in the US right now. I mean, probably in a lot of other places too, but basically, cops, like, they're not a friends. They just want to defend each other. They tell lies. This is like what they've been doing for a really long time, and just like, oh no, it's fine. Like, they're cool. They're my buddy. We'll tell whatever lies we need to defend them so that they don't get charged or anything like that. And to what you mentioned about Seattle cops as well. Like, yeah, I actually like work with homeless organizers in the area around here, and like when sweeps happen, it's just devastating. It's like, really, you're gonna make this happen during this pandemic and endanger not only those people but everyone who is interacting with them. Everybody that's a part of that sweep. It's just completely unjust. Seattle is a great place where you can see cops being a tool of the bourgeoisie because it's all just Amazon and Jeff Bezos like getting poor people out of the way and people of color out of the way so that they can do whatever they want with the land.
Jaisal, I know you covered the Baltimore uprisings of 2015 after the police murder of Freddie Gray. A lot of this looks like, I hate to say it like this, but same shit, different toilet, right?
Yeah, I mean, this could be, this happened, this could be any city in the country, any day of the year, right? This could happen today in Baltimore. This could happen in New York City. Something similar happened to Eric Garner in Staten Island, where you had an officer choke a man to death over his pleas, I can't breathe. And the thing that I would add is that we have to remember that the police force in America was created as slave catchers, right? They were created to catch enslaved people that were trying to escape to their freedom. So when you put it in this historical context, I was just reading today, issues of police brutality date back in this specific police force more than 100 years. So when you put it in this historic context, it's just, we haven't gotten past the formative sin of this country, which is the enslavement of Black people, the attempt to rob humanity of Black people. And, for all this talk of overcoming and this progress we've made, I mean, I do see a little bit of progress in the fact that these officers were fired immediately. The FOP, it seems like, at least to some degree, the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, the police unions, they released a statement like, please don't rush to judgment, which of course is ironic because that's exactly what happened to George Floyd, right? Like he was judged and he was executed on site. But again, yeah, the issue goes to, so they're fired, which is great. The officer, Pantalella or whatever his name was in New York, in Staten Island, that killed Eric Garner, I think he remained on the force for years, right? So the firing of the officers is a good step, but the real issue is, will these officers be charged? It is very rare for a police officer to be charged with murder, to be charged in cases where even when you have them captured on camera executing someone, that it speaks to the importance of having that video there. Those bystanders played a crucial role, because if it was just the word, if it was someone just dead in police custody, I wouldn't expect, no one would expect justice to happen. So here we are in 2020.
To me, it's just the general dehumanization of Black people, as if someone pressing their knee onto another person's neck for a period of almost 9 minutes, as if, did he not think he was hurting him? Or did he not care that he was hurting him? Did he think that George Floyd was lying when he said that he couldn't breathe? I mean, it's all of these negative stereotypes about Black people that have been reinforced for now centuries, that Black folks are liars, Black folks are criminals, Black folks, are inherently these bad people, and also somehow impervious to pain, right? You can beat the shit out of a Black person, but yet, you didn't actually hurt them. And let's call these officers by name, because the one who had his knee on the neck of George Floyd, his name is Derek Chauvin, Chauvin, okay? According to the website heavy.com, this particular officer has had a number of brutality charges against him. He has not been disciplined, it doesn't appear, for any of them. And now that he has lost his position on the force, is hopefully what we're hoping for is that he will be charged. But the other officers, Thomas Lane, Total, and J. Alexander Kueng, I can't pronounce that, Kueng, Kung maybe. You know, Marcus, there's the cop who had his knee on the neck, and then there's the cop that stood around and watched it. And the ones who stood around and watched it are just as complicit as the one who was kneeling on George Floyd's spine for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, Kim, you ever watch South Park when Cartman is like, "You must respect my authority"?
Yes.
That is literally the mentality of these jackrabbits. The complacency. There's no such thing as a good cop when you're going by the thin blue line that separates you from civilians' insanity. When you are a cop and you see bad things, and it's amazing to me that how police is a race, police is a color, and that color is blue. And when you put that blue on, there was an Asian brother who was sitting there blocking, instead of turning around and looking back down and seeing that this guy was doing an illegal chokehold and was kneeing on a brother's neck. That was a person of color. That was an Asian brother that held it up. And in the South, you'll see Black African Americans doing it to other African Americans. So what I'm starting to believe is, what I know for a fact is, being a cop is a race that is oppressive to people of color, specifically Black men. And at this point, we're going to have to figure out a different way to protect ourselves besides trust that law enforcement is going to do anything. The last point is this right here. Since the year 2000, African-American households have grossed the same, if not a smaller amount of money. The amount of Black men in prison has not gone down percentage-wise and per capita, no matter who's the damn president. And that is Obama, George Bush, Clinton, and even whoever wins, and Trump. Whoever wins this election right here, there's going to be a fundamental question about whether they're going to do something about police reform. And to be honest with you, the people who keep us in check are the modern day police departments, and they do not want to fundamentally allow Black freedom, because Black freedom could spill over into Black economic freedom. If it spills over into Black economic freedom, then you start messing with Wall Street. And if you start messing with Wall Street, then they start getting upset. So this is just another form of capitalism, honestly. Racist capitalism first, but make sure we use the big R races with this word. But trust me, capitalism has a lot to do with this. That's why we have publicly traded private prison company. So it sucks, and protect ourselves. That's all I can say.
Well, speaking of capitalism, I want us to put up this video for contrast, because last month, just really about 4 weeks ago, were the big Reopen Minnesota protests, not just in Minnesota, but in places like Wisconsin and more infamously Michigan, where there were a number of armed protests, brazenly armed protests at the Lansing State Capitol in order to reopen the state there. I want us to take a look at how much differently the protesters for Reopen Minnesota were treated versus the protesters who were demonstrating against the murder of George Floyd. Let's take a look.
I feel like our jobs are all essential in the state of Minnesota, and I don't feel like any governor, even Governor Walz or anybody else, can't determine who or when we decide we want to go to work, or where we work, or anything like that. That's why I'm out here.
Now, I just wanted to point out, at the time, you know, I didn't see any cops in that particular clip at all. And it's the freedom of being, white in America, Holly. And I know you may not agree with it or subscribe to the white power ethos, but I know that you probably certainly recognize that it exists. And how would you describe that contrast in power and literal freedom that white Americans have inherently over other communities, especially Black Americans, and how I guess the same fear of police fucking with you does really not exist?
No, it's not the same at all. I mean, I'll do my best to express like what I can know given the limits of my experience. But like, I think that Marcus put it really well when he said that this is racist capitalism. I mean, white imperialism, white colonialism is alive and well in 2020, and we see it in the arm of the ruling class and the ruling races or whatever, which is the cops, and just kind of saying like it's very blatant. They're saying. We don't have a problem with white people doing whatever they want, but if a person of color is trying to just live their life, we're gonna make sure to remind them that they're like someone who is considered beneath them by the ruling class. I mean, which I obviously disagree with. I mean, in the end, we are seeing the vestiges and very strong vestiges of just the way that this country was formed. Like you said, like slave catchers are where cops come from in the first place, and there's a long way to go.
Kiana Rainey from the comments says, if a Black person asks a police a question, they're resisting. You're not wrong about that, Kiana. I want to go, we're going to get to Amy Cooper in 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. But before we get to Amy Cooper, I just wanted to just show this other quick video. This video is something that's circulating on Twitter right now. It is apparently of a group of young Black men in Minneapolis at an office building that has a private gym. And these young men apparently rent space in this office building and were going to the gym as residents or tenants of this building are allowed to do. And because this white gentleman did not recognize them, take a guess at what he did. Let's take a look at the video.
Come on, bro. Watch out. We pay right here. What'd you say we can't do?
I'm Tom Austin. I'm a tenant in the building. Are you?
We're all tenants in this building.
What office?
Don't worry about that. I don't explain.
What office?
So we have an office here, and this guy came accusing us we can't be here.
What office are you in?
Don't worry about that. We don't have to tell you anything.
I'm calling 911 now.
Go ahead. As you guys can see, we're dealing with racism here.
Nicole? Hey, this is Tom Austin. I'm in the gym at the Mosaic. There's the whole, I don't know what to do here, but there's a whole bunch of people who don't appear to be part of the...
Y'all see this racism here?
Yeah, that's just the lead up for the big viral moment that just exploded on social media over the weekend, where in Central Park, a Black gentleman by the name of Christian Cooper is a bird watcher. He was watching birds at the Ramble, which is a spot in Central Park where people watch the birds. It's also a spot in Central Park where you are not allowed to have your dog off the leash. And that is where the conflict with dog owner Amy Cooper began. Let's look at that vid.
Would you please stop? Sir, I'm asking you to stop.
Please don't come close to me.
Sir, I'm asking you to stop recording me.
Please don't come close to me.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to me.
I'm taking a picture and calling the cops.
Please call the cops. Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Please tell them whatever you like.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, I'm in the Ramble, and there is a man, African-American, he has a bicycle helmet. He is recording me and threatening me and my dog. There is an African-American man, I am in Central Park. He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog. And my... I'm sorry, I can't hear you either. I'm being threatened by a man in the Ramble. Please send the cops immediately. I'm in Central Park in the Ramble. I don't know.
Thank you.
Now, as difficult as what actually happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis, this video is kind of hard to watch as well, because as a Black person, like, I'm feeling my blood pressure go up as I'm hearing Amy Cooper's voice become more shrill, as I'm hearing her call the police and lie about her being threatened by Christian Cooper. Marcus, you're the Black man on this panel. We're going to go to you first, bruh, because that very specific dynamic of a white woman claiming to be threatened by an African-American man. I love the fact how she wanted to make sure that she was being politically correct instead of calling him the flat out N-word, as she's calling police and feigning to be so frightened, so fearful of this man who did not approach her. She approached him. And we're going to get what she did to the dog in a second. But Marcus, this woman knew exactly what she was doing when she said, I'm being threatened by an African-American man. It smacked so much of what happened to Emmett Till and countless others in generations past.
My ancestors are speaking through my skin, and my hairs are sticking up on my arms as I watched that. That shit was attempted murder. I don't care what anybody says. That was attempted murder. And bare minimum, like, forget that she lost her job. Forget that she lost her dog. Like, she should lose free time. She should lose her opportunity to be free, because as noted, and here's the thing about that, Amy is a Democrat. Amy donates to Pete Buttigieg and Barack Obama twice. Amy is raving liberal, and she's not someone that we don't see. This is a woman that I would see at a local PC meeting, at the Democratic meeting. So exactly what's going on is she probably has a deeper understanding of how to get Black men in trouble than some even racist Republicans, because she's seen the videos before. She's had to. These are a part of Democratic conversations all the time. She knew exactly what to say to threaten this man's life, and he was supposed to run off because her authority and her power and her skin color gave her justified reason enough to police a Black man. The second thing that I want to say is, I notice how the media works. The media immediately want to find out what this guy does for a living, because there's no way that this white lady could have been wrong. And you know what they found out? They found out this dude was a Harvard-educated Black male gay bird watcher. The one thing that you can't attack whatsoever. So besides the Audubon Society probably having the best black relationship day that they ever had in their life, and the first time they ever saw any version of intersectionality, that lady needs to be arrested for at least a false 911 call. And I haven't heard about that happening either. She doesn't need to be working, and she damn sure doesn't need to have a dog.
Let's run through those tweets real quick, Dwayne, because I want to show, that, first of all, Amy Cooper was a VP at Franklin Templeton Investments. Well, we're starting with the Audubon Society. I didn't even know the Audubon Society had a Black bird watching segment, but Audubon Society said Black Americans often face terrible daily dangers in outdoor spaces where they are subjected to unwarranted suspicion, confrontations, and violence. The outdoors and the joy of birds should be safe and welcoming for all people. Okay, right on to the Audubon Society. Let's run to that at Franklin Templeton. Okay. Yeah, Franklin Templeton, that's her former employer. Following our internal review, this is what they tweeted yesterday, of the incident in Central Park, we have made the decision to terminate the employee involved effective immediately. We do not tolerate racism of any kind at Franklin Templeton. Well, I would love to see their EEOC records just to verify that claim, but nice thing to say. And lastly, from the Abandoned Angels New York City Cocker Spaniel Rescue, they tweeted Monday, I'm sorry, I get my days confused, May 25th. Thank you to the concerned public for reaching out to us about a viral incident involving a dog that was adopted from our rescue a few years ago. This evening, the owner has voluntarily surrendered the dog in question to our rescue while this matter is being addressed. Yeah, because that was the other major issue that online, that the social media response has been to this. How the lady was choking the shit out the dog. Lady, can the dog catch her breath, for God's sakes? Holly, you know, I think this has been categorized as weaponized whiteness, right? Where Amy Cooper assumed her position in society was higher than that of Christian Cooper's. So she figured that she could specifically reference him on a 911 call to New York City Police Department, who has a long reputation of shooting and killing unarmed Black people, and to basically put him in his place. I obviously know that this is not a position that you agree with. However, I'm sure you have witnessed this, the weaponizing of whiteness, the weaponizing of white women's tears and their fears and so-called fragility in a way that they could enable or engage the police to come and work as their agents.
Absolutely. I saw a tweet this morning from Chuck Tingle, of all people, if you know who that is, who basically said that if somebody calling a SWAT team on somebody's home as a result of being upset about a video game that they were playing with that person is going to be charged as attempted murder, then a white woman saying like the lies that she said while calling the cops on this person should absolutely be classified as attempted murder. It shows like how horribly broken our system is when someone who's in a situation like that, Amy Cooper, her first thought is, oh, I'll manipulate the racism of our police force to like attempt to harm, possibly kill the person who is basically just asking me to follow the rules. It represents just how broken everything is.
You know, Jaisal, the fact that Amy Cooper, as Marcus pointed out, has, I guess, identified herself, has been past identified as a Democrat, contributing to Democratic candidates, including first Black president Barack Obama. You know, this is not a super shock, I think, to most people of color who understand that, you know, white liberal does not necessarily mean white non-racist, but you know, at the same time, I think that, you know, this is the sort of behavior that maybe the wider public assumes would come from a conservative or perhaps a Trump supporter. But how does the fact that she identifies herself as a liberal, how does that play here, in your opinion?
I mean, I think that says it all, right? It shows, and we've had these conversations around stuff that Joe Biden says. You know, Joe Biden's, the Democratic nominee, authored this crime bill just a couple decades ago, right? And going back to, so there's that. There's the fact that, what was alluded to earlier, our society remains so deeply segregated till today, that for white people to see people of another race or another class in their homes, where in their buildings, in their parks, where they're not supposed to be, is something that sort of triggers this instinct that was enshrined, since the days of slavery, when Black people weren't allowed to be in these, were physically kept from these places and from segregation. When there was laws passed to keep people from these places. I will say, as a new dog owner, there's something about white people with their dogs off the leash that truly now terrifies me, because I have a puppy and I've been walking on trails where I've had to ask white people to put their huge dogs on a leash, and there's been all types of drama happen there. But I was just reading this blog post from the Discourse blog that talked about how this is what she did was an intentional act. She called the police knowing exactly what they were capable of. And, it actually invokes what happened to Emmett Till, who was a Black man in the South killed in the 1950s, right, by a white woman who just recently, before her death, acknowledged that this rape allegation, this harassment allegation she made against Emmett Till was just fabricated. It was made up. So there's a lot of work that white people need to do, whether it's their Democratic nominee, whether it's their internal politics. You need to acknowledge your your privilege in society, and that a simple act that you might not think is a big deal, actually could be a death sentence. So like, get your shit together, recognize your privilege and your power, and understand that history. And get your shit together. It's 2020. Like this world doesn't need to operate this way anymore. We need to be better than this. But I don't think things will be better until we have, major systemic reforms of our society. And I can't think of anything less than reparations. I think these episodes show the need for economic justice, and more than that. But we need to repay this debt that is owed to Black people in this country, and it's just the debt keeps piling on every day, and the wealth gap keeps increasing, and we see all the other disparities that COVID has exacerbated, and that's kind of bringing back to the point of the reopen protests. Those people aren't protesting so they can go back to work. They're protesting so poor Black and brown people can go back to work and put their lives on the line, so they can they can get their haircuts and they can get their fast food and all this other shit. It's like, that stuff's not as important as those people living and dying. We know they're dying at much higher rates than white people are, So it's just like, people need to educate themselves and grow and sort of understand how they fit into the system. The system exists to make their existence possible. It's just, this is where we are.
Jaisal, come on with it. I do want to add one thing, and this is very brief. If you talk about the biggest massacres in Black America have always started with a white woman's blame. If you look at Rosewood, Florida, if you look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, if you go to the EJI Institute down there in Montgomery, Alabama, right? They tell stories about the easiest way historically, and this is in the 20th century, how historically, if a community wanted to actually hurt Black people in a massive rate or take a certain Black person out, the first thing they would say is, he looked at my wife, he whistled at me, he touched me, he tried to kiss me. So when I see what happened with Amy in New York, it makes me think that it's just as American as apple pie.
Let me ask you guys a question, because Amy, I believe she gave a statement to CNN. I'm not sure if she actually has given an interview, but she apologized. And she said that her life is being ruined. Is her life being ruined? She did lose her job. She lost her dog. Apparently, she's been banned from Central Park. At the same time, the type of danger that she was putting Christian Cooper in, where he very easily could have lost his life. I mean, I don't think anyone who watches the real news anyway would say that that's hyperbole, okay? Because, I mean, guys, I live in black-ass Prince George's County, Maryland, okay? It's black as hell down here. There's a gentleman where I live who I think was having some sort of mental health break, where for a period of maybe a week, this guy would be outside screaming literally at the top of his lungs. He would be outside at 3 o'clock in the morning, yelling at the top of his lungs. He'd be outside at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, screaming at the top of his lungs. Nobody called the cops. The reason I personally didn't call the police is because police plus Black person having a mental health episode does not mix. And I knew if I called the police over him inconveniencing me by screaming like a lunatic would potentially put his life in danger. I did not want that on my conscience. And apparently the rest of the neighborhood felt similarly, because nobody called the cops on him. Eventually, somebody went over there and talked to him. He calmed down, got his shit together. The police never got involved. But when we talk about Amy Cooper and other people like a George Zimmerman, you know what I mean? Like people who have benefited from the protection of whiteness and now have been called to the carpet on their shit. Are their lives actually ruined? I'll field this to the whole panel. Everybody, you can jump in if you got an answer.
Look, she's going to go on her apology tour, and she's going to try to make amends, and she still has her white privilege, right? She's going to be all right. She's going to land on her feet. Maybe she'll move to a different town or something. But she's going to be fine. Like, I'm not worried about her. I hope she can grow and learn. And I'm more concerned that she's actually going to grow and learn and use this opportunity to build and to maybe educate others. And I think the fact that she has to experience inconvenience shows that, okay, that shows growth in this country, that we're at a point at least where, trying to get a black person killed because they wanted you to follow the rules in a park, that is unacceptable now, right? So that, for me, that is the progress. Another level of progress is using this opportunity for her to educate others about how privilege works, how the system works. That's more what I'm concerned about. She's going to be okay. She worked at an investment bank, right? Probably living near Central Park. She's making like 6 figures easy.
Nice 6 figures.
Yeah, she's fine. She's going to be okay. She's going to be okay.
Holly, hop in there. I know you had something to add.
Yeah, mostly the same. I mean, she didn't even get charged with attempted murder or anything like that. She lost her job. But like you said, she's an investment banker. I'm sure that she's got plenty of money for now, and it will not be difficult to get another job pretty soon, I imagine. In the end, like you said, it's an inconvenience to her, but she still has her white privilege. And it would be cool if out of this, she kind of did the bare minimum and tried to learn and grow and use this opportunity to educate other people and use that platform and stuff like that. That would be cool. And certainly her life is not ruined to the point where that's something that is her responsibility at this point. The bare minimum, at least.
Marcus, it was all good just a week ago for Holly. Holly was living on top of the world, baby. She was living in Manhattan. She was making the nice 6 figures. She was snuggling with her dog. And all of a sudden, shit went all the way left.
Free that dog. Free that dog.
Yeah, free Henry. I can only imagine. I wish somebody would do a voiceover of what that dog was saying in his mind while she was like, yo, no, you the one who up here lying, lady. Get the hell off me. Listen, if I saw Amy Cooper, I was raised in an age where when white women saw me, they would clutch their purse. I remember this. They would lock their doors at red lights, right? They would they lock their doors at red lights, and they would cross the street. I'm at the point now where if I see a white lady walking towards me, I'm crossing the street. I'm reversing it. I'm doing exactly, because that is the most dangerous thing to me. And I live in a gentrified old 4th Ward down in Atlanta. Back where it used to be the hood, now you have, white ladies literally walking down the street in front of a house that used to be a drug den or a community center. And I see them all the time. And, the black folks who still live here are like, man, the neighborhood's changing. But I'm more so like, man, I hope I don't get identified or someone calls the police on me just because of me being black. So I can't front. Like, I wouldn't have been the bird watching brother because I wouldn't have said a word to her in the first place. I would have just kept walking. Hopefully your dog doesn't bite me, because whenever interaction happens between a white man and a black woman, it always ends up bad.
And I wanted to add that I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, this is just a conjecture, but I wouldn't be surprised if the same lady posted on social media about her outrage at Donald Trump's racism, right? But had no awareness, no self-awareness of that latent racism inside of her. And, conjecture, but how many more times has something like this happened from people like her? And just not caught on camera. We don't know, but again, hopefully this can be some type of learning. Something good can come out of this.
Well, Jaisal, there's that part of it. Oh, go ahead. Well, I wanted to say real quick, the fact that she held a high position at Franklin Templeton, meaning that, she was somebody's boss, right? How does she treat her black employees, her employees of color, her Latinx employees? You know what I mean? Like, her racism undoubtedly manifested itself in other ways outside of this incident. And that to me was the most, which troubled me additionally. I won't say it's the most troubling.
I hope someone talks to her. You mentioned she's high up in her organization. I hope someone talked to some of her subordinates that might have challenged her on something at some point. And what happened to them, right? You saw how she just snapped when she was called out for breaking the rules, right? That's what I'd be concerned about more than her, like, well, you know, her personal job right now. Like, let's try to undo some of the damage that she's probably done in her life. You know, that's what I'd be interested in hearing about.
Kim, I want to say this. At one point in my life, I interviewed to be a Democratic Party executive director, and I was the most qualified person for this position at the time. And when I got finished with the interview, everybody gave me praise, but I saw this one Amy Cooper in there that literally, just you could feel the vibe. And I remember feeling like she felt uncomfortable with my presence. And the next day they called me and said, "We're sorry you didn't get the position." And then the sister called me that worked in the same party. She was like, "Oh, they think you're too urban." And what I'm afraid of is that, when Martin Luther King said he was afraid he brought his people into a burning house, the Democratic Party could possibly be the burning house that we suspect it to be, with a bunch of Amy Coopers. If you think about the pushback when it comes down to hiring Black staff on campaigns, if you think about the mentality that it has when it comes down to actually doing real outreach for Democratic campaigns in Black neighborhoods, if you think about why we're always focusing on Midwestern white women, right? To me, I think that there's a million Amy Coopers that are within the party that I'm a part of right now. And so I think it's systematic that just because you're progressive, just because you managed to vote in a Barack Obama, just because you managed to donate, and just because you say, well, trust Black women, doesn't mean that your actions are actually going to do anything for people of color and Black folks. So I want Amy Cooper to be a shining guide that, like, we're not getting it right either on our side.
And I find it interesting that she supported Mayor Pete, right? Because Mayor Pete, mayor of South Bend, was facing protests over his handling of his police force and how they treated the Black residents of that
police chief. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the black police chief. And that was actually when I was covering the primaries in New Hampshire. That was something I ran into. Mayor Pete did really well in that state, as well as in Iowa too. And I was asking his supporters. I ran into some of his supporters at some of the big events, and all pre-pandemic, of course. And I asked. That was one of the questions I asked, because they were all his support. I mean, we're in New Hampshire, so almost everyone's white, but all of his supporters were white that I spoke to. And I wanted to know what their thoughts were. That a lot of Black residents of South Bend took issue with his candidacy and his platform, and they had no idea what I was talking about. They said, "Oh, I'll look into that." They were just not aware that he had that issue. So another interesting thing to kind of fold into this whole incident. Mayor Pete supporters.
Yeah, Black. In the comments, we got some comments from the comments. Black Man 903 says Amy Cooper should be charged with abuse of 911, and I saw this sentiment sort of echoed. And I'm gonna hit this point, and then we're gonna move on, because gang, if we're against over policing and misuse of police, do we want to sick the police on okay, Amy was trying to call the police on Christians, so now we call the police on Amy. You understand what I'm saying? And it's not to say that she should not be punished, but she is already facing consequences of her actions. Is it the right move to get police involved? Damn.
Yes, absolutely. That's not even a question. Listen, you know how many Black men get arrested on some bullshit and then lose their jobs? And then the baby mama get mad at them and they get in more trouble because they can't pay their bills on time? Fuck that. Of course she should lose her job. She should be arrested. Like, let her pay the consequences and then put her on a mantle and say, look here, Karen, this is what happens when you keep calling cops on Black people.
Yeah, and fundamentally, I think we have to remember that the role of police is not to serve and protect people. It's to serve and protect property, right? Whatever consequences she might get a fine or something. That's going to be a drop in the bucket for someone living on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, right? But yeah, she absolutely should face consequences. But
Legal
yeah, I mean,
consequences, Jessel, beyond what she has already, she aside from what she's already lost, you think that the law should be called on her as well?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there should be. I don't know if a law exists. I mean, I am skeptical of trying to enforce. Like I said, I'm skeptical of trying to use the police to enforce our way out of this. I think what Marcus said is right. She still should face consequences, but ultimately, whatever laws are passed to try to hold people like this accountable, it always ends up coming down on poor people and black and brown people. I think there could be a law passed for white people that try to get the police called on people, on poor people or black and brown people. I think that seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I would love to see some lawmakers present that bill and get that passed in state houses across the country. Gang, I want us to move on because we talk about black and brown people who are poor. Well, gang, we are looking at some of the worst unemployment numbers really in history. We haven't seen this level of unemployment since the Great Depression. And, when we look at nearly 40 million people unemployed since the end of February, I mean, this is absolutely staggering. But the bills continue to be due, folks. And, your landlord probably doesn't give a shit about COVID-19 or any of that. And they want their money first of the month on time. And Holly, this is where you come in because you are outreaching communications for Rent Strike 2020. In the case that people don't know what that is, can you bring us up to speed on this very, very important work?
Yeah, so there is a huge rent strike movement that's been building for the past few months. Basically, the core idea is that landlords have made an investment, and the difference between that and other investments shouldn't be there. There should be no expectation that while 40 million people have lost their job and are currently taking on the brunt of the cost of the pandemic, that landlords should get their money for some reason. I think that we definitely all, as a community, need to work together to share the brunt. I mean, obviously, rich people should pay more and take more of it. But certainly right now, because of the way that rent is and because everyone's lost their job, the working class, people of color, immigrants, it's lots of people can't get unemployment. I have friends who can't get on anything like unemployment because they are immigrants, or maybe they didn't get their check because they're married to an immigrant. All these people are currently taking the brunt of this natural disaster. And that not only is super unethical, but it's also super not sustainable. This is the level of capitalism where if they oppress us too much, if they take the working class and they they keep them down so much, it's just going to collapse. And that's kind of the tightrope that capitalist leaders and well, not really leaders, but more like oppressors and oligarchs have always had to walk, which is how much can we take from these people before it's so much that it's actually a problem for us. And right now we're getting to that point. So basically what rent striking is about is mostly happening on the building level. And we're trying to help people with that at Rent Strike 2020. I also work with Puget Sound Tenants Union, which is like a local effort that's doing that sort of thing. And what it is it's literally all these people, thousands and thousands of people across the country are doing the same thing right now. They're not an organizer, they're not an activist, they don't do this stuff, but they have to because they can't pay rent. They get up, they go and they knock on the doors of all their buildings safely, and they say, look, a bunch of us can't pay rent. The rest of us need to withhold rent in solidarity as a threat to the landlord in order to exercise our collective power and force them to make concessions, to share basically the cost of this pandemic.
So to talk to us about, because the rent strikes that I've seen on social media have been happening in high rent districts, right? Like your own in Seattle, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in Washington, D.C., in New York City. Talk to us about some of the successes where people have been successful and why a rent strike and not a rent deferment.
Well, so basically rent strike as a term is a tool. It's one of the ways that tenants can exercise their collective power. what we want, and one thing that we have been fighting for from the beginning, that we have petitions for, we have 3 million signatures for, is rent cancellation for the duration of the pandemic, for months afterwards, until people have their jobs again. Ideally, for me, we would cancel rent forever and have just housing be a human right. But for now, at least, we can fight for rent cancellation. The thing about rent deferment that people are saying, like, so in Seattle, and I think both state of Washington, there's a new law saying that landlords must, create a reasonable payment plan as an option for their tenants. And it's like, yeah. So at least rather than millions of people getting evicted, millions of working class people are buried under thousands of dollars of debt. It's not really good enough at all. It's not better. But that's the main problem with rent deferment, is that the people who can't pay rent right now are also the people who cannot handle several $1,000s additional worth of debt. I mean, this stuff, it's going to ruin people's lives. If someone's been saving up for 5 years and they have to use all of those savings to pay rent in the next 3 months before they can get a job back, that's 5 years of their life, like, that they were trying to save up money, that they were trying to, have their life plan. Basically, the rent deferment is still going to be just as life ruining as if we don't do anything about this.
Jaisal, I help me out here, because I thought you reported upon this, but now I can't remember if it was Taya Graham who reported upon this. But the group called Moms Rising in Los Angeles. I know, I want to say April, May, maybe. They had taken over some empty houses in the Los Angeles area and moved homeless families right on into them. You've covered this topic, if I'm not mistaken.
I did not actually, but I think, was it in Oakland? I'm looking it up right now. Was it Oakland they had the
I thought it was LA.
occupation? It was LA?
I'm pretty sure it was LA, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe it was Taya who covered this. Sorry, Jaisal.
No, it's okay. But what Holly was talking about is a huge problem. It's something like 1 in 3 people right now have trouble affording rent. In Baltimore, again, Baltimore is one of the most segregated, economically and physically segregated cities in the country. And you guys might have seen that there was a protest done where there was a big re-election billboard for Jack Young, and someone changed it to say rent strike and fuck the police. And it was kind of funny because a couple weeks after that, Jack Young, the mayor, started a new program, as many cities have, to offer rent assistance for the millions of people that are not going to be able to afford rent. And what's important to remember is that even before this pandemic, something like 40% of people in Baltimore were already rent insecure, which means they spend more than a third of their income every month on rent. And also a similar number, I think it's like 2/3 of working people in Baltimore don't have 3 months savings. And so people are going to be out of work for 3 months. And so they're going to be totally broke. They have no money left. People that can't go back to work or don't want to go back to work, unemployment's going to run out. And, this is a massive crisis. And yes, what Moms Rising is doing in cities where real estate is overpriced, where things, where communities have been gentrified out of their homes, reclaim these homes, right? A lot of people have 2 and 3 homes. A lot of rich people have 2 or 3 homes. They don't need to be using all that property right now when people can't find homes. Like put them in those homes. Like let them have safety. And yeah, absolutely. Let's make it permanent. We spend $500 billion a year in our military. We can certainly afford to pay everyone's rent as long as need be, so people can live and have shelter during a pandemic. It seems like common sense, but we know what the priorities are for this country.
Marcus, I am truly terrified, honestly, about what's coming in the next several months. Forget the second rise of COVID, right? Which by all these assholes who went out on Memorial Day weekend, just out here, just showing off. Fuck Dr. Fauci, fuck what everybody's saying, stay home and social distance. No, people went out here and showed all the way out on Memorial Day weekend. But that notwithstanding, the fact that the $1,200 federal stimulus has already come and gone. That might have been a lot of people's 1 month rent. Forget utilities, food, clothing, gasoline, etc. But that's come and gone, and it does not appear as if there is going to be more federal economic relief coming for the average ordinary worker, right? And then once the courts reopen and these municipalities say, okay, landlords, it's okay for you to start eviction proceedings against people who have not paid their rent, I'm just really afraid we're going to see a tsunami of people who are housing insecure and homeless, people living in their cars, people living blatantly on the streets, the encampments. I mean, this is really bad if we don't get a handle on this really soon.
Yeah, I'm afraid there's going to be worker camps in Centennial Park right in the middle of Atlanta, the way that things are going. Look, if you own a 40 to 50 unit home, then you are probably a part of the 1%. I mean, if you own a building that has multiple homes, you're not necessarily struggling. And you got to understand something about society. This is who the government actually listens to. This is who the rich donors, these guys actually donate to the mayor and donate to the senator and donate to, and they get listened to. And when you start messing with their pockets, that's when things change. I want to give a brief history lesson because I don't want us to forget this at all. Back in Montgomery in 63, 64, they did the Montgomery bus boycotts. That means that every black person who rode the bus got tired of sitting on the back of the bus. So they got off the bus, they stopped riding the bus, and they made the company, the bus company and the city of Montgomery lose a whole hell of a lot of money. Well, guess what happened? When they started losing money, they said, well, we'll let you back on the bus. You can sit wherever you want as long as you sit, as long as you ride the bus again. The point of this is people had to walk 20 miles, 40 miles, 30 miles a day. People had to drive cars together. People had to do different things to go out of their way in order to make a change for their community and ultimately America. Well, if we think about the rent strike, which I got to give Sister Holly much props to, think about the rent strike, we're thinking about one thing. It's easy. Just don't pay.
Yeah, that's
it. That's really the crux of when you're using rent strike is like this is something that's risky. This is something that's costly, like you said, you're walking miles like that. It's really easy to not pay rent when you can't pay rent. Kinda. The key is like, it's important for, I have to acknowledge this, that it's important for people to remember when they're, doing a rent strike, that this is a risky thing, that people can become evicted as a result of trying to exercise their collective power as tenants. But I wanted to also respond to something Kim said earlier, which was what are the successes? And there, for example, there was a building recently who got organized. There, I think 20 units or something like that. They said, look, a bunch of us can't pay rent, and they managed to get them to agree to reduce rent by $300 for the next few months. Which that's a good first step. It's not what we need, but it certainly is better than nothing. And there's another building which got a landlord to agree to waive rent for certain tenants if they've been affected. Of course, not only did they force the tenants to prove that they've been affected by COVID-19, which is just another hoop to jump through, but they also didn't tell everybody about this that they had gotten, which means that the people who weren't a part directly of the action didn't know about it. And when these people tried to put up posters and let everyone know, the landlord was like, stop, don't tell them, you can't do that, which is just obviously the most greedy, something that you could see. So, but there are successes out there. Be careful and make sure that, I guess I want to say to people who are watching right now, who can't pay rent right now, we're with you. You're not alone. And while it's really important to be safe, there are successes that are happening out there. There are people that are successfully getting concessions from their landlords as a result of collective action with your tenants. Go speak to your local tenant union, hit up Rent Strike 2020, and we'll redirect you because the local tenant unions have been doing this for decades. They know what they're doing. They can help you. They often have strike funds, eviction funds, and it's just important to have solidarity right now because we need to be doing stuff like rent striking, but it's also risky. And we need to make sure that we protect our comrades in the working class from the potential consequences of what they're doing, which is a good thing.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Holly Blue, French Strike 2020, Jaisal Noor, Marcus Ferrell. Panel, this was a great discussion, guys. This was a wonderful way to rejoin the week. And I certainly appreciate all your time and all y'all's valuable perspective for joining us today on Stir Crazy. Appreciate it.
Thank you
Appreciate
for having
you guys.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And gang, I saw y'all getting rowdy per usual in the comments. Y'all need to simmer down, okay? just chill it out. Smoke you some reefer, relax. That's our show. I'll see y'all tomorrow for another episode of Stir Crazy. And y'all take it easy. See you, bye.